Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
How's Seattle these days?
Stunningly beautiful. It is 78 degrees and sunny, the way that all of us Seattleites picture our city. It's a good town to be in.
And an excellent food town, is it not?
It holds its own. Yeah. Who are you really asking that question to? I'm a fan of our food town, but I'm also a little biased.
Okay. The restaurant that is your last name, Canlis. Food and Wine came out with their 2025 list of the best restaurants in America, and they placed you number 2 on that list.
We're honored.
Which is, in and of itself, a terrific achievement, but even more so, I think, when you've got a legacy restaurant. When you've been around for 75 years, it would be awfully simple to get by on your reputation. How do you keep it fresh? How do you keep it good?
The first thing we do is to recognize out loud that getting by on a reputation would be a death sentence. That's to say, you're right. There are a lot of places for whom that it might be a business strategy. For us, it is exactly the opposite. We feel like every day is an opportunity to make ourselves new a little bit. And I think of that personally, and I think of that professionally. Am I actually alive and flourishing and growing and being made new? And then am I creating this space as a place where my staff can be doing that? And then are we collectively doing that for the restaurant? Are we allowing Canlis to think of itself in new ways, to reinvent itself, to ask the question, is there any way we could serve the guest a little bit better tomorrow, given that tomorrow is a completely different world than today is? And so fundamentally, we start with the belief that we could probably do it a little bit better tomorrow.
Well, you've been doing a fair amount of changing, and I want to get to that in a moment, but I want to start way back when. This restaurant's been around for 75 years. How did it come to be?
My great-grandfather ends up cooking for Teddy Roosevelt on safari. I mean, we could go back further if you want, but this is a fun place to start the story. And so they are in Africa, and at the end of this long trek, my great-grandfather and a bunch of other folks would be brought into the country. They immigrated. That would be 1908. By 1910, they had a restaurant in Stockton, California, and 4 little kids. So they all grew up in this restaurant. And Peter Canlis decides that he doesn't want anything to do with it. So he runs away, ends up in Hawaii, and he's selling dry goods. And World War II breaks out.
This is your grandfather?
It's my grandfather. And he ends up helping out on base, like so many people of the time. It's a time of national crisis and emergency. And if you were in Honolulu at that time, you got drawn into it. And so he did. And pretty shortly, he finds himself complaining about the food and talking a big game. And the chef essentially looks at him and says, you think you can do a better job? Go for it. And so he takes over running the USO. That was a new organization designed to serve men and women serving our country and their families. And by the end of the war, he's made a name for himself, and he opens a restaurant on a little beach called Waikiki. So that's how we get in the restaurant business. That was 1947. He opens that place. He'd come to Seattle in 1950 because Seattle's really late out of prohibition. We've got new liquor laws. He hears he can get the very first liquor license in the city. He applies. He gets it. He tries to open a place downtown. Nobody would give him any money. But there was a gentleman who said, I've got a place way outside of town, and if you're interested, you can have it. And that was the building that I'm sitting in today.
With a remarkable view.
It is remarkable. Look, that's what I'm looking at. I don't know what you're looking at, but here's, you want to know how Seattle is. Look at that.
For those of you listening and not viewing, it's a gorgeous sight out that window. What lake is that?
That's Lake Union. And we were just looking at the University of Washington at Gasworks Park. We're looking over at Capitol Hill and the university. And then beyond is like Washington, we can just see. And then beyond that would be the Cascade Mountains. So it was really fortunate that we had the opportunity to put a restaurant here. My grandfather passed away in the 70s. My parents ran it for many years. Then my brother and I ran it for many years. And just recently, it's just me and my wife.
I want to get to that in a minute, but don't jump over the you and your brother running it. Your parents had it for a number of years.
Sure.
You had also seemingly run away from it. You went to Cornell, which has a known hospitality program. Were you in that?
I was, kind of still am. I just taught a course there. But yeah, we were encouraged as kids to go do something else. And we all got to work here and wash dishes and that kind of thing. But there was very much this parental push to go become who we were hoping to become or meant to become or something. And a not covert message that said, feel free to get out of the restaurant business. It was encouraged in us that just because our parents worked in a restaurant, we didn't have to. Moreover, if I'm putting words, or the way I remember my parents saying it would just be, the restaurant's not likely to even be there when you're of the age where you might want to work there. And if it is there, we might not hire you. I think there was just this early on, this push to sort of go out and work in other places and think about our lives outside of the restaurant world. So I ended up going to school and paying my way through school with ROTC. And so found myself in the military.
You were a captain, right? In the Air Force?
Yeah. But at some point, my parents said, gosh, about 30 years in, we're getting a little tired. We're not as good as we used to be. We're not as quick off the draw. And would you ever consider working here before we consider selling it? And it was weird to hear them talk about selling the restaurant. I'd be honest, that caught me by surprise. And I'd never really envisioned that. And I was loving being in the service. But so I came back to just try my hand at it. I was terrible. At some point, Dad said, you could really use your brother. You guys should do this together. So I pulled him. He was in the military. I pulled him out and we started working together in 2005. And we just started having a blast. That's been 20 years, the two of us together. It's been a wild ride. It's been fantastic. We've had so much fun.
Didn't you work for Danny Meyer before you did this?
Before I came back, the board of directors said, he doesn't know what he's doing. Send him to New York. So Danny hired me. I got to open Blue Smoke for him.
His famed barbecue joint.
Yeah, such a joy, that team. And then
I just interviewed Amy Mills.
Oh, no way. Okay, yeah.
Whose father, Mike, a barbecue icon, was his partner.
Legendary.
Yeah.
So yeah, I worked for Danny for a couple of years in New York and then found my way back here in 2003.
So 2005, it's you and your brother, older or younger brother?
Younger brother.
So you guys suddenly own a restaurant.
Well, it wasn't sudden. We had to buy it from our parents, and I'm still paying that loan off. So I would say we very gradually owned a restaurant.
Well, it's the same way I own my house, except for the bank. Yeah.
That is the way that it happens in this family. So
okay, so you take over this legacy establishment, and you and your brother start changing it.
A little by little, and then
did it tick your parents off?
And then a lot by a little. Only the mistakes, the things we did right, made them happy.
We'll be right back.
If we're gonna go back into restaurant years, 20 years ago is about, in dog years, I don't know, it's like 600. In restaurant years, it's like 1,000. It was a different world back then.
How?
Well, the Food Network is all of a sudden on the scene, and the age of the chef is coming into its golden era, and the world is figuring out sourcing in a new way. And the United States is developing its own cuisine in a way that it really never has. There is so much happening in that time. And our restaurant needed to grow, needed to evolve. And so Brian and I were looking at that, saying, if we're going to give this a go, let's see how far we can take Canlis. And we saw it as a company and a brand and a philosophy, a business philosophy that had a lot of untapped potential. And so we started making moves to see if we could polish the old girl up and make it something special. It already was something special. I think any restaurant that's made it 50 years is a lot to stand on. But at the same time, you're only as good as your last meal. And we knew we had changes to make.
I get the sense it was yesterday's menu. Steaks, chops.
Yes and no.
Okay.
I mean, a little bit. I think as we ask ourselves the question, what is fine dining? There are, several dozen restaurants around the country sort of rewriting the narrative for that. There's probably a couple of hundred that are involved in that conversation. That's a moving target. And I think fine dining was rapidly changing in those days. And what we all wanted from a restaurant was changing.
In what respect? Was it that we looked at France as the ultimate cuisine? Was that Americans ate bean and potato? What had it been and what should it become and what did you make it?
I'll speak to the 40s and beyond. Before that, I'm over my skis. But yeah, you're looking at a country who took all of its cues from Europe. In those days, we are looking at France and largely Western Europe, Italy, and some extent England. And we're kind of saying that's cool. We should do it like they do it. And so here come, heavy sauces, big cuts of meats, tableside flambe things. These are the restaurants that in New York City and San Francisco and other places are sort of defining what fancy is, defining what fine dining is, defining our own cuisine, even though most of it was borrowed from Europe. Okay. So then along comes Peter Canlis, and he's sort of paying attention more to Asia and some other things that are going on across the Pacific. And as food is evolving, we are slowly letting go of our attachment to Europe and noticing some very things going on around the world. Suddenly we're looking at Il Bulli in Spain. And then a decade later, we're all up in Northern Europe. And we are suddenly saying to ourselves, a lot has changed in fine dining. You went from huge a la carte menus because options were opulent, suddenly to restaurants that couldn't afford the options, either in food cost or labor cost. And they're saying, oh no, let's do set menus. Let's do pre-fee. Let's do much smaller. And refinement was opulent. You went from a time in the 70s and 80s and 90s where something from around the world was extravagant. Because in the days when we opened this restaurant, it was a big deal to be flying Dungeness crab to Honolulu and opaka paka, mahi mahi, and ahi into Seattle. No one had seen that before. To put a fish on an airplane, no one had done before. And now you have Alice Waters suddenly 30 years ago saying, hey, wait a second. If the tomato is not grown on your roof or in your backyard and you don't know that farmer, you're missing the beauty and the glory of food. She's 100% right. So the world is discovering in this moment, hey, what is fine dining? Also, you take the chef who was not to be seen or heard of, in many ways, sort of this indentured servant.
Well, the front of the house guy was the face.
Front of house guy, even the fact that we called it the front of house, and the back of the house, there's two dissimilar, talk about the sort of like inequity built into the language, front and back, right? So you're taking now chefs and you're saying, wait a second, this is a legitimate craft. These people are artisanal craftsmen, masters of their trade. We should celebrate that. We should pay attention to it. We should give it honor. We should give it some space. And here comes the internet. Here comes food on TV. Here comes reality TV shows that take you behind the scenes into the kitchen. The world of restaurants is blowing up. That's what's happening. And if you're taking over Canlis in that time frame, you can bet Brian and I were saying, we've got to be evolving so much faster than we ever have. And if you're not moving quickly, you're already behind. That was us coming out of the 90s and into, early 2000s. So yes, we made big changes. The city showed up with torches and pitchforks because they didn't like half of them. I had guests arrive who hadn't eaten here for a couple of years, sit at the table, and before I give them a menu, tell me they don't like the restaurant.
Well, what had you taken off and what had you put on the menu?
Oh my goodness. Mainly what we had done is brought in a chef from New York City, and our lovely local patriots of this town said, wait a minute, we don't want to learn from New York City. And I think anytime anyone says we don't want to learn, you might have found yourself on the wrong side of the argument. I don't know why you wouldn't want to learn, frankly, but there was a kind of a hard-hearted approach to that. But we softened them up. And I think Jason came in within a couple of years, showed Seattle a whole different elevated game in fine dining.
With dishes such as?
No one in Seattle was doing anything compared to Chicago, LA, or New York at the time. Dishes such as, he did a foie gras torchon called peaches and cream. I've never had people just order back-to-back foie gras, finish the dish and say, I would love to have that course again. He did a dish of pears and beets, same thing. He did a miner's lettuce salad. It was the most beautiful, most delicious salad I've ever seen. He did a duck that he had learned from 11 Madison Park and changed it and done it here. I've never had people so crazy about a dish than that duck dish.
By the way, we're talking about him without his last name. Who is this chef?
Jason Franey. Yeah, he was the executive sous chef from 11 Madison Park. He worked for Daniel Hume. We brought him out. And I think it did elevate the game of cuisine out here. And I think that was an important first step of many steps. And he's not the only chef doing that at the time. There were others. But you have Seattle sort of coming into its own as a food town in the late 90s and early 2000s.
Over the years, chefs leave, chefs come in, although not that many. You were bringing in celebrated out-of-towners, correct?
Sure.
Such as?
Our next chef, Brady, our next chef, Aisha, all from out of town. Yes.
And you were getting noticed, James Beard nominations, that sort of thing.
21 of them. No one's counting. We didn't really win any of those, James. That's not true. We won 3. But yes, we got a lot of nominations and people started paying attention. I had Dana Cowan come in and I said, how come you never write about us? And she said, oh, it's because you don't matter. I was like, thank you for being honest. I love it. I love a true New Yorker.
Who said that?
I think that was Dana Cowan at the time. At the time, she was, I believe, at Food and Wine magazine. And we were trying to get them just to even acknowledge that we existed, let alone had this.
Well, they love you now.
Great news. They do. And she said, you need to win the awards that we do. And we said, oh, tell us about your awards. I said, oh, there's a People's Choice Award and an Editor's Award. And I said, how do we do it? And she said, in not so many words, it's basically a popularity contest. Get on social media and see if you can get your fans to support you. So we did. So we started doing some fun things on social media that got the entire city excited. And this kicks off an entire era of people thinking that Canlis was an old, stodgy, traditional restaurant and realizing just the opposite.
Well, what sort of wacky stuff were you doing?
Let's see. We hid a 1950 menu across that bridge behind me, and we posted a clue to it and said to Seattle, let's play a game. And within about 2 weeks, there were 60,000 people in this town playing this game nightly with us, which was seeing if they could find a 1950s menu to come in and dine at 1950 prices. And the clues were all based on Seattle history. We did that a few times. And then we started doing fun things in our parking lot that were maybe unusual for a fine dining restaurant. Other people thought they were unusual. I thought they were very on brand.
Well, where does the nacho cheese fountain play into this?
That's one of those parties. We started throwing some fun New Year's Eve parties and just asked the question, how should this city really celebrate? What would be a really fun way to celebrate? The nacho cheese fountain came from a party called Shut Your Mouth Nacho Hair, which was an entirely nacho cheese and champagne-based party. It was a wig party. That's where the nacho hair comes from. And it was a really fun dance party. And from that, we just started doing unusual and fun creative things. I think fine dining is just, if you were to ask me now, I think it's the most considered form of dining. And so whether you're considering the best nachos and which champagnes they go with, or whether you're considering a sophisticated dessert on a sophisticated night at a sophisticated restaurant, it's the same muscle in the head. It's the muscle of consideration, of creativity, of thoughtfulness.
Coming right back. At the same time that you are growing your footprint, I guess, by doing the nacho cheese fountain and the like, what role was your food playing? I mean, presumably you had to up that game as well.
Sure. I think the food was getting better and better. And I think every chef who we've had has done a good job expressing time and place, a good job expressing, hey, what is Northwest cuisine?
What is Northwest cuisine?
It is an expression of the food of this region and of the people of this region. And here that might get a little contentious, but I think when we say the people of the region, we need to take a real hard look at who formed the city and the culture of the city, who built this town and who continues to define it culturally, and how can we celebrate that history, past and that present, and then that future.
Well, who are we talking about?
Any region's cuisine is a function of the people and the food they're growing in the land.
Well, but who built the town? Whose food do you need to be aware of?
I think you have, firstly, the town was built by people not indigenous to the land. So you're looking at native populations who have been here forever. Then you have white settlers coming in. Then you have immigrants coming in. Then you have essentially slaves coming in to build railroads. You have a bunch of folks all over Asia, Southeast Asia, Japan, China. So there's a strong Asian influence into Seattle. And so as we go back and start to decipher, hey, who is Seattle and how do we invite them to dinner? We need to pay attention to their stories, their traditions, their food, who's growing our food, and what are these recipes? So it's not just Northwest cuisine. I think any restaurant paying attention to the cuisine of its location should be and needs to be asking these questions. Who are we really serving? And what food would serve them best and celebrate them best?
And how is that awareness now reflected on your menu?
You know, it's interesting. Why do you think the focus for you is so menu-based?
I don't know. You tell me.
I will tell you.
I mean, I think the soul of a restaurant does center around what comes out of the kitchen.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think a restaurant centers around what comes around in the kitchen. I don't think you care what's for dinner. I don't think you care what I put on the menu. You just want it to be good. The guests coming in tonight, none of them have called me to say, hey, what's on the menu? Is it scallops or halibut? Because if it's scallops, I'm not coming.
Oh, no, and your menu's online.
Of course it is. And no one is reading online saying that's why I'm going to go there. That's not why you go out to eat.
So what are you offering them that attracts them?
The reason we go out to eat to a restaurant like mine is because tonight needs to matter. That is the thing that every guest has in common. You don't just casually go spend this kind of time, these kinds of memories, this kind of money haphazardly. You do it because you have something going on in your life, and a restaurant helps you hallmark that moment. It helps you remember. It marks it in time. It celebrates it, puts it on a pedestal. It slows time down. It allows you to see one another. You notice how much we're talking about food? 0. Rule to the game. Food has to be spectacular. Food honors the people. Strategy for winning the game, pay attention to the people. Restaurants are about people. I don't mean to be coy or avoid your question. I think our menu is indicative of the people of this restaurant serving the people of this city. It is ever and always evolving and should be. It's the reason a 75-year-old restaurant like mine only has one thing from the 1950 menu.
Which is?
It's a canless salad.
That sounds like a great... Tell me about that.
That's, again... You love to talk about food. The menu is online. The recipe is all over the world. The New York Times has written about it. It's a darn good salad. My great-grandmother sort of came up with it. My grandfather made it famous, and we've all been chemically and clinically addicted to it ever since. I've eaten it at every family event of the last 50 years of my life. It's just a delicious salad. I think the point I'm making is a restaurant is a function of its people. And to the degree that we pay attention to food and forget people, I think we're making a great mistake. Every review I read spends 90% of the review talking about the food. It's ridiculous. By the time you come to the restaurant, the whole menu will have changed. Talk about the chef. Talk about the kind of leader they are. Talk about the impact they're having in the community.
Let's do that. You recently had a change of chef. And for the first time in your tenure anyway, after a nationwide search, you went with a guy who was a Seattle native and already in your kitchen.
True story.
Why?
Because I believe in who he is as a leader and who he's becoming. I believe in the things he hopes for. I believe in the way that he loves and respects and sees people. I believe that the people who work for him will become better versions of themselves because they work for James. You can also cook the lights out. Sounds like a guy I want to work with. Frankly, he's a guy I want to become a little bit like. And life's too short to spend our time with people that we don't want to become like. We become like the people we spend time with. And I spend a lot of time with the chef. And a lot about him that I just deeply respect as a human being.
Well, we should put his full name in the episode. It's James Huffman, correct?
James Huffman, yeah.
Okay. He's
been here 9 years. We searched all over the world. We are actually bringing in some of that talent. We met a ton of fantastic people. But at the end of the day, James earned the position, and I'm super excited to have him leading this kitchen.
And whether you want me to focus on individual dishes or not, innovating the offerings at your restaurant
is a fun part of the story, is that when Aisha left early spring, that's one delivery of food coming from the farms. And then mid-spring, late spring, and early summer is completely different. So James, who was running the kitchen at that time, had the opportunity, the challenge, the responsibility to be updating the menu as the food was changing. And as that happened, yes, Seattle very much voted with their praise, even though they didn't know who was cooking for them. We heard over and over and over and over again how much people were loving the food. And so in many ways, the city voted James in without even knowing they did so, which is kind of fun. They didn't get a chance to do the other tastings, and we brought in a lot of talented people, and they cooked some just beautiful food for us. So maybe James had an advantage, but also I think he earned it. To stay in one place for 9 years says something. He understands his guests. He understands my staff. He understands the mission of this company. And that's not easy to do.
Again, more than you'd probably like me to, I do want to talk about some of his food. You say he knows the guests. Were the guests clamoring for charred pork belly with broccolini and pear consomme? Or Calbee-style beef that comes with spring onions cooked by burying them in charcoal and onion tops?
True story.
Yeah, but was your audience clamoring for that, or did they taste what you offered them and say, yeah, I'll go there.
Were you clamoring for an iPhone before Jobs invented it?
No.
And yet you might have one and probably like it, right? So no one ever called and said, could you put pork belly in the menu with a little pear consomme? That just doesn't happen. What happens is somebody says, hey, I've been coming there for a lot of years and I'm going to come in next week. And it's a really important deal to me. My wife and I are having a baby and this is the last night. It'd just be the two of us before we're at home with a kid. Or it's our first anniversary. We've never been. We've heard about it. Or I'm bringing my grandma in. She lived in Seattle for 65 years. She's never been. And we're going to spring for it. Eating here is really expensive. And I don't take that lightly. And so if you call and say, I'm bringing my grandma in, she's waited her whole life to dine here. Man, I don't care what the food is. It better be spectacular. Why? Because that's how we honor your grandma. We honor her with a dish that just blows her away and is so delicious and so scrumptious and so thoughtful. That's what's going on. Grandma doesn't care if it's pork belly or salmon or scallops or rapini. Grandma's just saying, hey, can you make something good tonight? And that's our job. James has been crushing it.
Let's talk about the other big change. You and your brother ran the place together for 20 years. He has decided to move on with his family. He's moved coasts, I guess.
I don't know if we can call Nashville the other coast. Do you think we can? I mean, it's almost...
You're close, okay? If you drive to,
He's coast adjacent. Yeah. He definitely headed that way.
Yeah, he headed that way.
So excited for him.
He's working with Will Guidara, right? From 11 Madison Park originally.
Yeah. Formerly of 11 Madison. Now, I'm completely spacing on the name of his new company, but he wrote Unusual Hospitality, and he's got so many things going on. Brian's going to go help him grow that company.
Are you lonely in the restaurant now?
I will always miss working with Brian. It was one of the great joys of my life to get to be side by side with him for 20 years. If you have siblings and you're close to them, you can imagine how much fun it would be to be able to mix work and play and to not have to separate our professional selves from our personal selves. It's a riot. We have so much fun. And I think the work that we've put out shows that. Lonely, it would be a stretch. I have 115 of the best staff in the world. I now get to work with my wife.
She's joined the company now.
We could call this an upgrade of sorts, which is really fun for us. We've never done that before. We have 3 kids at home, but less at home these days as they're older. And so that has left Anne-Marie a little more time and space to help me out. And thank goodness, I need it. She is a secret weapon to me, for me. And now I think the restaurant gets to see just how supported I have been by her. And it's pretty cool. So I'll miss working with Brian for sure. I feel like we can do anything together. We certainly proved that in the pandemic and other times past. I feel like an unstoppable force with him. And now our charge is to celebrate him and to send him off well, which we've done, and to sort of bless this new phase of life that he's in. And I think it's awesome. I think what he's done is courageous. It takes a lot to walk away from a place like this and to lean into the things that give you life. And I think all of us are craving that for our own selves. How do we walk into the newness that is promised us tomorrow instead of being trapped in what is yesterday? And we're all figuring that out, right? So he got to act that out on the world stage as everyone pays attention to every move that he makes. But that's what's going on, is that there's a lot of goodness in this change. And Anne-Marie and I are so excited for he and his wife, for his 4 kids. I just think this is going to be an incredible season for him. So my job is to keep running our restaurant, and I'll do that as best I can. And if I need to get on the phone from time to time and give him a call, I bet that'll happen too.
You mentioned the pandemic, which was kind of an inflection point for the business. Some people survived, many did not. How has the business changed since then? It seems to me it's even tougher to run a restaurant than it used to be.
You're right. It's harder now to run a restaurant than before the pandemic, for sure.
Because?
I think a lot of the restaurant industry was built on a bad foundation, a foundation of not taking care of its people in a sustainable way. You all spent a lot of time wondering if the coffee beans on the menu were sustainable, but very little time paying attention to the health and welfare and well-being and flourishing of the barista or of the server or of the cook. And it's not just you, it was the restaurant industry at large. And a lot had to change. And the pandemic sort of burnt half of that down. It fanned the flames of a fire that was already going. And a lot of people left the industry. So there are fewer people in the industry today than before the pandemic. The margins are lower. The guest expectations are higher than ever. So the magic trick of making a restaurant work, which has never had comfortable margins, they're pretty slim. It's harder to pull that rabbit out of the hat today than it was pre-pandemic. You bet. Hands down. And yet there are people who still want to go out to eat, and we all still get hungry, and we all want to be treated in a way that makes us feel like we exist and are wanted. And so restaurants aren't going anywhere. It's on us as an industry to figure out how to make it sustainable again, how to make it work.
You talk about finances and margins. Look, you got accused of treating employees less than fairly. There was a class action.
We got accused of treating our employees horribly.
Okay.
Of stealing from them. We were accused of creating a whole system that lied to the guests and to the employees and stole from them. Yes. And didn't allow them to take breaks and made them work without pay.
And you settled it.
We did.
People settle lawsuits to make them go away. Was there a glimmer of, hey, we could get better about this in there? Or
no. I run the restaurant the same way I've always run the restaurant, and I 100% stand behind how we run the restaurant. This place has been leading the industry in that way for years and will continue to do so. I don't take my cues from a damaged or broken litigious society. So no, I'm not going to be scared off by an attorney who wants to come along and, by the way, is now suing another restaurant in the same way. We all see what's going on here, right? And so no, I'm going to keep doing what we're doing. I was really proud of the way that we did it. And now we're seeing a lot of restaurants actually switch to this model. So we're talking about tipping. We're talking about the inequity built in the tipping system, a system that we borrowed from another country and frankly didn't borrow it very well.
You say you use a model that others are switching to. What's that model?
Right. So let's just talk about tipping for a second. There is a lot of inequality. There's a lot of racism. There's a lot of sexism sort of built into the way that tipping happened. And there's a wage equity issue. That's to say, it's pretty hard to get those tips to the kitchen, depending on how your system is set up, what state you're in, what state governments allow, and such and such. So in order to pay your people fairly, these tips can be tricky. In Washington State, we raised our minimum wage early on, and the writing was on the wall that no one would be able to afford that minimum wage and the way the old tipping system works. So we've actually moved our servers to our whole dining room staff to a higher hourly rate. It's very risky for the restaurant to do that. And we moved to a service charge. And that's legal and a great idea. And I think starts to tell the guest a truer story about what the cost of a restaurant is. The fact is, what became in the early days as a little bonus actually morphed into an essential piece of the operating system of restaurants. So that's what's broken. It is still broken. We're still trying to fix it. Danny tried to do this heroically a number of years ago
and failed miserably because
he was ahead of his time and the guest wasn't ready for it. But that's where we're all going, is to show the true price of what dinner costs. And frankly, the guest has been protected from the true cost of dinner, and tipping was a poor medium for sort of bridging the gap. So what we did, in 2016 was to move to a service charge model. And I think you're going to just continue to see restaurants moving in that direction as there's so much fraught with tipping.
The economic health of restaurants, prices for everything are going up. There's only so much you can charge at some point. Obviously, as a restaurant owner, you got to be concerned about the state of the industry.
No, I'm not concerned about the state of the industry. The industry's job is to survive, not to moan, not to whine. Our job is to run our companies. And we do an awfully good job of it. I'm just talking about Canlis, talking about thousands of restaurants across the country. Is it hard? Yes. Our job is to love and care for guests and provide a meal for them that still gives them value. Prices are going to go up forever. That's not going away, right? The cost of labor will always go up. That's not going away. The value of people should only increase. If we're ever decreasing the value of people, we may be on the wrong side of a fence that I don't want to be on. So all of that. And also, you will keep getting hungry. You will always want to go out. There will always be a need and a demand for the services that we're providing. So a bunch of really smart people are going to get together and figure out how to do that. That's where we're at. And it is hard right now, sure, but that's okay. We'll figure it out. We, the restaurant industry, will figure it out. And guests are going to have to stay open to learning, just like restaurant owners are going to have to stay open to learning. Tomorrow, there's a better way to run these businesses. We'll figure it out.
Will there be a fourth generation of Canlis family members running this place in a few years?
My crystal ball has been broken my entire life, so I've gotten out of the business of predicting the future. There are a lot of children running around in both my brother's families and mine. That could be amazing, but there's no pressure for them to get involved in this business and no expectation for them to do so either. Their job is to become who they were created to become. And my job is to support them on that journey, in that endeavor. I don't pretend like running this restaurant might be what's best for them.
Mark, you are absolutely fascinating to talk to. I very much appreciate your taking the time to do this.
Do you want to go back and talk about the food now? Sorry, I did.
I cannot tell you how refreshing it is to have someone offer another viewpoint of something.
Well,
especially when it's an informed viewpoint.
It's worth what you paid for it. I tell you what, thank you for having me on. I do think this discussion is one that as a nation and as an industry, we are deeply involved in and need to be. There are just so many people pouring their heart and soul into what they're doing. And I know that the guest hears that. I know they feel that. And I do want to offer a word of encouragement. We'll get through this. It's tricky right now. That's okay. We got this too.
Mark, thank you again.
You bet. It's good to be on the show.
Mark Canlis on Culinary Characters Unlocked. I'm David Page, and I'll see you next time.